On today's show, the Hawks begin their in-season tournament run on Tuesday. We'll have a focus on that, as well as some mailbag questions, injury updates, and more, and all that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1587 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening into Tuesday. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. If you're a new customer right now, you can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast, as I always do on the show, to make us your first listen each and every day. Check us out across podcast platforms, places like Apple and Spotify on the audio side, as well as YouTube on the video side. And by the way, I plug at the top of the podcast, we had 5 shows last week, plus a very busy week to come on this podcast. We'll be answering your mailbag questions on this show, previewing the in-season tournament, which begins for the Hawks on Tuesday, and then touching specifically on that game on Tuesday against the Pistons in Detroit. And by the way, Trae Young is on the injury report. We'll get to that momentarily and later on in the podcast. We'll start, though, with some injury updates from the Hawks that dropped on Sunday. So I did a podcast Saturday evening after what became a pretty frustrating loss for the Hawks, I will certainly admit. But in between now and then, the Hawks announced some injury updates on Kobe Bufkin and Mouhamed Gueye. Of course, they were the first 2 draft picks by the Hawks this last summer, and they've both been out a little while already and will be out a little bit while longer for sure. Bufkin was already out with a broken left shooting. That's a shooting hand. His left thumb is broken. He had another x-ray and a review on Saturday from the Hawks. And the Hawks are now saying that his quote-unquote return to play timeline is going to be 8 to 10 weeks from the original injury. So the original injury happened on November 2nd, about a week and a half ago. So 8 weeks after that will be December 28th or thereabouts. 10 weeks would be January 11th. So that's not a definitive timeline. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly between those 2 dates, but that's 8 to 10 weeks to give you an idea of how long it will be. So Bufkin's going to be out at least until late December, very late December or January, and certainly not ideal for anybody involved there. Then you have Mouhamed Gueye, who's out of the injury report originally while the team was in Mexico City to face the Magic last week. And he's actually missed the last 2 games with what the Hawks were calling a right lower back strain. Then he had an MRI on Saturday when the Hawks got back, of course, and it revealed a, quote, right low back stress fracture, end quote. He'll be reevaluated, according to the Hawks, in 4 weeks. And that 4-week time period would be December 10th for Mouhamed Gueye. And by the way, I always say this, but I'll say it again now. Reevaluation does not mean return. So this does not mean that he's going to be back in 4 weeks. It means he's going to be reevaluated in 4 weeks. So generally speaking, I assume that a guy is going to be out longer than that evaluation time period kind of lays out. People ask me kind of to interpret these 2 things. I should always stress this. I am not a medical expert, but I am more concerned with the available information that we have right now on Gueye than I am about Bufkin. Even though Bufkin's stated timeline is longer than Gueye's. A broken thumb is just a broken thumb. And honestly, if it was his right hand, I think Kobe might be able to come back faster, but because it's a shooting hand, that obviously takes a little while longer, but there's not really anything lingering about a broken thumb. They'll fix it, it'll heal, etc. He can stay in shape because it's more of a fluke injury, more of a one-off. Like I saw someone say injury prone, like that's not really true at all. Obviously a broken thumb is a broken thumb. But again, I'm not an expert on this, but I'd be a little bit more alarmed, I'm not panicking, but a back injury and a stress fracture in a back for a 6'11" guy is worth monitoring for sure. That is something that probably could have the ability to linger a little bit when it comes to the future. I don't know that to be sure. And again, reevaluation is not being returned. But if you're asking me to rank them in terms of concern level, I think Bufkin might be out longer, but that's a more straight ahead injury. Whereas a stress fracture in your back for a rookie big man is not exactly ideal at this point in time. Anyway, though, as far as impact on this year's team, not a ton. Obviously, I think Bufkin has a path to playing time potentially. At least small playing time, or especially if the Hawks are healthy, maybe not a ton. But I think Gueye would probably need 2 or 3 injuries to actually get on the court. So the impact on the Atlanta Hawks, not necessarily College Park Skyhawks right now, is not a ton. But obviously, they're top 2 draft picks, so worth talking about those at the top of the podcast. Okay, from here, we'll dive into the mailbag a little bit, answering your questions, and then some of those will have to do with the in-season tournament. And at the end of the podcast, we'll talk about the game on Tuesday. The first question comes from Will, who says, very plainly, is it too early for a Kings update on the draft pick? And the answer, Will, is that no, it is never too early. So I'm recording this podcast Monday evening. The Kings do play late tonight, so I'll keep that in mind. I'm going to be one result behind. But Sacramento currently, as I speak, is 4-4 with a underwater negative net rating. Granted, De'Aaron Fox has missed 5 games. They're not the same team without him. That's very clear. But as stated many times previously, the Kings had basically perfect injury luck last year. That was not going to happen again. It just never does back-to-back seasons. I'm not going to do a full-on deep dive on the Kings or this draft pick situation right now, but a quick reminder of why Will is asking me to talk about the Kings on a podcast about the Atlanta Hawks. And that's because the Kings owe their first-round pick to the Hawks in 2024, which is this coming draft, if they make the playoffs. So basically, if it's outside the lottery, and that is, of course, part of the Kevin Huerter trade. So if the Kings get into the 8-team playoffs in the West, the Hawks will get their pick, whether it's 15th, 16th, or 29th, 30th, etc. If they miss the playoffs this year, the pick will roll over to 2025, where it would be top 12 protected. And if they did it again, it'd be top 10 protected in 2026. The only way the Hawks do not get a first-round pick from the Kings is if the Kings miss the playoffs 3 straight seasons, and in 25 and 26, they also have to be bad enough to not even be on the fringe of the playoffs. So I think it's likely that the Hawks get that pick, obviously. And I think personally, the Hawks would be justified in rooting for the Kings to be like the 7 or 8 seed this year. Just get it over with, get a pretty good pick out of that, etc. But there is some luck involved there, and certainly some different opinions. This is not the best draft in the world, for instance, according to people that I trust at this point. But this does not mean much at all. It is incredibly early and too early for this to matter really at all. But if the season were to end, let's say right now, this second, the Kings would be giving the Hawks the 16th pick in the draft. That is a best case kind of scenario for Atlanta, but obviously a long way to go there. For those asking actually a question about this otherwise, I don't really change my opinion too much on the Kings right now that I did before the season, because as long as Fox is back pretty soon, I think they are a middle of the road team in the West. I had them to win somewhere in the low 40s, and that is probably going to be a play-in or low-end playoff team. We'll see if I'm right and where that puts them in the West ultimately, but they're 500 right now through 10% of the schedule. We'll see, and basically a big TBD, but we'll have more updates on that as we get further into the season. I can pretty much assure you on that, and a lot of interest from the Hawks, especially if they're hovering around this range. When we get into February, March, and April, Hawks fans will start taking close attention to the Kings down the stretch of the season. Okay, we'll have more on the in-season tournament, mailbag questions, as well as the Pistons preview in advance of Tuesday's game. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by Ibotta, and big holidays mean big family get-togethers. You don't have to spend all the money on Thanksgiving spread without having to get anything back in return. And with Ibotta, you can get your turkey and all of your sides for free, potentially. Because starting November 1st, for the 4th year in a row, Ibotta is giving 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving feast. Add the offers in the app to redeem for everything that you need to make your Thanksgiving feast complete. And all you have to do is shop for your favorite retailers and upload your receipt to Ibotta. They give you cash back on hundreds of different grocery items for produce, personal care, and pantry goods. So make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you happen to be purchasing. And other apps give you points. They don't always amount to much. With Ibotta, though, you get real cash back. You can cash out to your bank account or to PayPal or to gift cards. You can also earn cash back on hundreds of different online brands and retailers as well when you start with Ibotta, and that includes places like Lowe's and Macy's and Sephora and Best Buy and many more. Download the Ibotta app right now and use promo code LOCKED to get 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving dinner starting November 1st. Go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app right now. Use the promo code LOCKED when you get there. That is IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use promo code LOCKED. Check out Ibotta today. All right, a relevant and timely question here from Anthony, who says, with the in-season tournament coming, how many road games in a row will the Hawks have to play in order for the team to win the in-season tournament? I know, looking at the schedule for November, they don't play many home games, but I'm still confused by the tournament structure, because I remember you saying that they would have to play a bunch of road games in a row during one episode. So basically, I'm using this question from Anthony, and shouts to Anthony for listening and sending the question in, to refresh on the in-season tournament, because a lot of folks have asked questions about it lately. It's already been happening for most of the NBA, because, in fact, 27 of the 30 teams, as I'm recording this podcast on Monday, have played at least one in-season tournament game, and the Hawks finally play their first one on Tuesday in Detroit. I think one of the reasons why the Hawks have not played one yet is because they went to Mexico City, because one of the other there are 3 teams total that have not played a game yet. 2 of them are the Hawks and the Magic, who played, of course, last week in Mexico City. Just a hunch. Anyway, the Hawks are in East Group A, and basically there are 5 teams in every group and 4 teams. Basically, that sets it up to where you play everyone once in your group in group play. So the Hawks play Tuesday in Detroit. Then they play this Friday at home against Philadelphia. Then they play on the 21st of November, which is a week from tomorrow, against Indiana at home. And then they end the in-season tournament schedule with a game on the road Tuesday, November 28th against the Cavaliers in Cleveland. But from there, 8 teams, 4 from each conference, will make the knockout round of the season tournament. So the 6 group winners all advance, and then 2 wildcard teams, 1 from each conference. And then if teams happen to tie in the group play, which will probably happen some, the first tiebreaker is head-to-head, then point differential after that, et cetera, et cetera. From there, the quarterfinals, the teams that make the top 8, will be played in the home markets of the team that have the best record in season tournament play on Monday, December 4th, or Tuesday, December 5th. If the Hawks are not in the quarterfinals, meaning they are one of the 22 teams that don't make it that far, then the league will schedule them 2 more games on December 8th and December 6th, 1 home game and 1 road game. And the schedule is made by a formula, so we don't know yet who they would actually play in those games. And also, if the Hawks were to lose in the quarterfinal and get there and lose, basically, they would have to play a regular season game on December 8th that, again, is not scheduled yet, and they would face another team that lost in a quarterfinal matchup. From there, I promise I'm almost done with this. December 7th, semifinals in Las Vegas. If you make the semifinal and lose, you are done. And obviously, you've already played enough games to where there will not be any games scheduled. And then if you advance to the final in Vegas, December 9th, is the only game that is extra. So essentially, the in-season tournament is part of the regular season, unless you make the final game. And in that case, you play 83 games instead of 82 games. So all that said, you can find more information on that, I promise you, somewhere else if you need to. But as for the Hawks, they probably need to beat Detroit on Tuesday. So it's hard to kind of have a virtual must-win. And I want to, again, nothing is a must-win. But it's the easiest game to have on the schedule in group play. They do get Indiana at home. Indiana's, though, playing pretty well, start the season in a lot of ways. And the Hawks will be favored in that game probably, but Detroit is the weakest team for sure in the group, even though the Hawks have to play them on the road on Tuesday. And they probably have to at least split with Philadelphia and Cleveland to have a real chance. Because, look, it's not impossible that a 2-2 team might win their group if everything just breaks crazily and point differential comes into play. But likely, in a group that has Philly and Cleveland in it, et cetera, especially Philly, you probably need to go 3-1 to get out of your group or earn a wild card spot potentially. Right now, by the way, Philadelphia is 1-0, so is Indiana. Detroit is 0-1, and Cleveland is 0-1. Notably, Indiana beat Cleveland, so that's keep that in mind for the future. So, all that said, an important game on Tuesday. But now to the end of Anthony's question about road games. The Hawks could have a particularly weird schedule, and it could be hilarious how long they are away from home if things break this perfect way. So, the Hawks have a 5-game road trip in late November, early December. They play at Washington, at Boston, at Cleveland, at San Antonio, and at Milwaukee. A weird trip. You don't often see, Washington, Boston, Cleveland, then down to San Antonio, and then back up to Milwaukee. That's a weird schedule. And that Cleveland game, by the way, is the last game of the group when it comes to the in-season tournament. Anyway, from there, the Hawks will have another game that is scheduled until December 11th because of the way the tournament lines up. So basically, the entire league is unscheduled right now from like December 3rd through the 10th or 11th because they have to leave that open. So if the Hawks make the quarterfinals, they could have that game at home, but if they don't have that game at home. So if the Hawks make the quarterfinals and go on the road, again, that's 2 qualifiers that are not easy to have happen, they would have to play another road game. That would be 6 in a row. Then if they win the quarterfinal on the road, they go to Vegas, which wouldn't be a road game, but it'd be a neutral site game away from home. They play at least 1 game there, if not 2 games there. So there is a world. It is possible for the Hawks to play 8 consecutive games away from Atlanta and not have a home game from November 22nd through December 11th, which is about 3 weeks. That is possible. Again, not super likely to happen because it would require them to make the quarterfinals and be on the road in those games and then keep playing and playing and playing. But it is possible, and I am a sicko with the schedule stuff, so I thought that was kind of funny, and there you have it. Okay, question now from Caden, who says, any idea on why Patty Mills is not getting any minutes? Is he going to be more than a Udonis Haslem type on this team? I've got questions about Patty in the last couple of weeks, even dating back to the summer, I will say. I did a deep dive episode, actually, on Patty Mills with Reed Wallach, who covers the Nets very closely over the summer, and that might be instructive on listening to that podcast at some point in time. But I'll start here. Mills not playing to this point is not a surprise at all to me because it is what I was forecasting would probably happen during the summer and during training camp if the Hawks were healthy, which is a key point. The big thing is the Hawks have had no injuries to their key guys until even that, no injuries to their key guys at all. Their top 8 have not missed a game. Their 9th guy, AJ Griffin, has not played for coach's decision reasons, but has not been hurt at all. So all their key guys have played every game. And because of that, there's not really been a lot of, uncertainty with the rotation. Trey was on the injury report once, ended up playing. The only guys who have missed any games at all are Bufkin, Gueye, and Wes Matthews, who is now back. From there, Quinn Snyder clearly likes to play a shorter rotation than some coaches do. Last year, he was pretty open with the media about preferring to play 9 guys rather than 10 down the stretch, which kind of led the Hawks to choose between Jalen Johnson and AJ Griffin night to night late last season when the whole team was healthy. This year, it's been 8 guys a lot of the time, and 8.5 guys sometimes, and 9 guys or whatever, but it's never more than 9 so far this year. I don't think there was really ever a world where Patty was going to be in their top 8 or 9 guys this year coming into the season. But the real question is whether they would actually play him in the event of an injury or an absence of some kind for Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. Right now, we just don't know. And we'll talk about this a little bit later on. There's a chance Trae does not play on Tuesday, which I don't know what that's going to look like. But that is the kind of scenario where we might learn a little bit more about the plan around Patty Mills, because I think we're just not going to know anything on this topic until there is an absence for one of the guards. The math will tell you that they're going to miss at least 1 game this year between the 2 of them. Trae and DeJounte are probably not going to play all 82 games each. So at some point, we'll learn more. But again, to this point, every single competitive minute this season has featured one of Trae or DeJounte on the court. And as long as that happens, they don't need Patty Mills. So let's say, for example, that Trae or DeJounte were going to miss a game. I think we know that one of the other guy, either Trae or DeJounte, would play as much as he can in that game, probably like 38 minutes, something like that. That still leaves you with like 10-ish minutes at that spot when that player sits, whether it's Trae or DeJounte. Right now, Bufkin is also out. If he was healthy, he might play some of those minutes. You also have Trent Forrest as an option, obviously a low ceiling option, but Quinn trusts Trent Forrest. He's a very good defensive player. Not a high upside guy on offense by any means, but they like him. Also, they could play some minutes with, like, let's just say Bogey and Jalen Johnson as the primary ball handlers in a lineup. I'm not saying that's great, but it certainly is possible with their skill sets. And then, of course, you have Patty as the other option. They didn't play him a ton of the preseason, which is notable. He's not been playing garbage time much either. It isn't that weird that he's not been playing garbage time because he's a guy in his mid-30s, and I still don't want to have that guy run around for no reason at the end of the game. But there is a chance, to the question from Caden, as we got to get back to the question itself, that the Hawks view Patty Mills more as a mentor type, locker room presence guy who they may not want to play a lot. And that's defensible in a lot of ways. He is a beloved guy behind the scenes. I will note that everyone seems to like Patty Mills, but they gave up very little for him in the offseason. They basically turned Rudy Gay into Patty Mills, which is not like they were not going to keep Rudy Gay anyway. So that was it was a bandage move and also a veteran guy. And they have 2 veterans now who are in their mid to high 30s in Patty and Wes Matthews, but they have not really had to make an affirmative decision on Patty Mills in the way they did with Wes Matthews. Like Wes Matthews, they went out and signed. Patty was like just kind of available, and they swapped a guy for him, etc. I'll say this: Patty is a very useful offensive player. If you watch him in the World Cup this summer, you will know he still is pretty dynamic with the ball in his hands. He's a really good shooter, but he is pretty old and he's pretty small and can't defend, and he's not really a pass-first facilitator either. So all those things, like he's not the greatest backup point guard, quote unquote, type. And playing him with Trae doesn't make a lot of sense. DeJounte maybe a little bit better, but there's no reason to do that right now. So I think the clearest path to Patty Mills playing would be any time missed by Trae or DeJounte. And even then, they might use Trent Forrest. I don't know. We might learn more about this as we'll get into this later on in the podcast on our next segment. But maybe that's the first time we see that without Trae. And I have a feeling they might be choosing between Mills and Forrest, and TBD on what they do there. But until we get an absence for Trae or DeJounte, we just won't know for sure on the outside about Patty Mills. And even then, 1 game sample won't tell you anything either. I think, well, it would tell you something, but it wouldn't be definitive. I think you probably would need like a week or 2 to see what the actual answer is. But good question here, and we just don't know yet. But they do like Patty quite a bit behind the scenes in Atlanta. I can tell you that for sure. All right. A break here to hear much on today's podcast, and we'll come back with a preview of the Pistons game on Tuesday. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Snap into the action this NFL or NBA season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 to you if your team wins. Beyond the awesome perks of signing up, FanDuel has everything you're looking for across the sports betting space. They have point spreads and over-unders and money lines and player props and future bets and much more. Live betting, same game parlays, it's all there for you at FanDuel. The app is safe and secure. They cover the whole range of sports for you as well, beyond the NBA, of course, which we talk about on this podcast all the time, the NFL, they have college football, they have MLB stuff, they have WNBA stuff, college basketball, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, MMA, boxing, it's all there for you. They have Hawk stuff across the board too. The entire scope of things will be available for you on the game on Tuesday against the Pistons, including live betting once the game begins, but pregame player props and point spreads, etc. will be there for you. And now is the best possible time to join up with the folks at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check out the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network with an offer that you absolutely will not want to miss. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, and we'll get out of here now with a preview of Tuesday's game. We don't often do like flat out previews, but it was a good time to do that, given that it's the in-season tournament opener for the Hawks, as we discussed earlier in this podcast. The Hawks are in Detroit already. I will actually be there for this game. I'm leaving shortly after this recording for the game. A bit of a whirlwind travel situation with a back-to-back for the Hawks, because the Hawks also play on Wednesday at home. Keep that in mind. But Detroit is 2-9 right now. They have the longest active losing streak in the NBA. They have lost 8 games in a row. I will say, while Detroit is not good, I am pretty clear about that at this point. They're not as bad as 2-9 looks. Their net rating is like -4. They're not good on either end of the floor right now, but I think that they do have some talent. Kate Cunningham as chief among that on that list. But offensively, they really do put a lot of pressure on the offensive glass. They are good there. They are big and athletic when they want to be lineup-wise. Not a ton else. They will be missing a key piece of that with Jalen Duren in this game. But not a lot of spacing on this roster. They commit a ton of turnovers so far this year. Not a lot of free throws. Some weird lineup construction. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of their offensive plan in general. Now, Cade is dangerous for sure, but not a team that I'm definitely afraid of offensively. Defensively, they have better personnel defensively than offensive. I think at this point in time, they have done well in opponent shooting so far this year, and they're good on the glass. That's 2 keys for the Pistons defensively in this matchup against the Hawks. But they don't really force turnovers. And by the way, coming into the night, they are dead last in the NBA in free throw attempts allowed. So especially if Trey plays, but if he doesn't, they will have a path to get to the line in this spot for the Hawks. Now, as I mentioned before, Trae Young is on the injury report. It popped up late in the day on Monday. Interesting setup here. Trae is officially listed as questionable for personal reasons as of Monday night. Now, that came out about 5 o'clock Eastern on Monday. Within about a half hour after the injury report, Trae himself announced on social media, I know on Instagram and Twitter, etc., that his wife had a baby. So he's now a father of 2. Congratulations to Trae and his wife Shelby on their second child. I don't know if that means he's going to play or it means that he's not going to play. I had an inkling that personal reasons had something to do with that, because I knew that he announced that she was pregnant earlier this summer. And if you do some math on that, it would have been out of the ordinary to have this be the timeline. But we don't know if he's going to play or not. I have a feeling that she was not in Detroit. So he'd have to actually get to Detroit at some point between now and tip-off on Tuesday. He, of course, is Trae Young. I'm sure if he wants to be there, the team will get him there. But we just don't know. So people asking me if I have any information on this. As of Monday night, I don't know. I don't think he was in Detroit. I'm pretty sure he wasn't in Detroit. So we will see if he gets there and plays or not. If he doesn't play, that will be totally understandable, obviously. He just became a father. It'll be 24 hours or so before that. So no one can or should blame him for not playing. He might be able to play as well. Trae likes to play games, so we'll see if he gets there or not. But it's a big TBD at this point. And again, if he's not there, I think you will see probably at least one stint from either Patty Mills or Trent Forrest, although they probably could get by if they needed to or wanted to with a lineup that featured a little bit more of a no point guard situation with like Bogey or AJ or Jalen, guys like that who can handle the ball a little bit and maybe not be traditional at point guard. Anyway, we will see. Obviously, Trae is a huge absence if he's not able to play. He is their best player, most valuable player, all that stuff. So certainly the perception of the game will swing based on whether he is there or not. On the Detroit side, a lot of injuries here too. Jalen Duren is out. Bojan Bogdanovic is out. Joe Harris is out. Isaiah Livers is out. Monty Morris is out. So that's 5 guys. I think probably 5 of their top 10 or 11 guys, something like that. You could argue Bojan is in their top 3. Jalen Duren is a breakout. He's obviously very, very good as well. He's been starting. Joe Harris, great shooter. Monty Morris, rock solid backup point guard type, etc. So Pistons are obviously weakened. I think if the Hawks could trade Trae for all those absences, they probably would. But we will see on all of that. As of right now, as I record this podcast, there is no line available according to our folks at FanDuel. I think the Hawks will be favored in this game if I had to guess, whether Trey plays or not. They'll be bigger favorites if Trey plays. Don't get me wrong. But I think given all the absences for Detroit, the way the Pistons are playing, and look, this is a Hawks team that is better suited now than it was a couple years ago to deal with Trey being out. And by the way, sneakily, the Hawks have always been pretty good, or at least pretty decent, in one-game samples when Trey is out. Now, Trey's going to be out 2 weeks. That's tough, and this time he won't be, obviously. It's not an injury. But they've kind of had a history of rising to the occasion in these one-game sample sizes, like your Brandon Goodwin type of games where like they beat somebody they probably shouldn't beat, etc. So we'll see. I think they probably would start Bogey if I had to guess if Trey didn't go, and they go with DeJounte at point guard, etc. All of that right now is an educated guess, and we'll find out more as we get into Tuesday. But again, the Hawks need to win this game from an in-season tournament standpoint. Now, every team probably values this tournament differently, but from what I have heard, the Hawks do want to win this thing. They actually care about it on some level. And again, on paper, this is the easiest game of the four. And when you probably need to go 3-1, you don't want to lose the easiest game of the four. So it will be easier if Trey plays. But again, I firmly believe the Hawks will be favored without him, and they should beat the Pistons without Trae Young. Is the task difficult? Sure. But I think that would be, especially after a bad loss on Saturday, I think they're probably get an inspired effort here from the Hawks no matter what. And a game that they probably should win even without Trey up in Detroit. With all that said, I'll remind you one more time, as I have been for a while now, that there has been some extra content in the audio-only feeds of this podcast. So do not be surprised if you are a subscriber on Apple or Spotify, etc., to find some bonus shows coming from the network and the folks at Locked On Sports Atlanta. That does not affect me at all. It's just extra content, bonus content, no less from me, I assure you. But there you go. And I also encourage you, as always, to subscribe to this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Google, Overcast, etc. on the audio side. And we're also on YouTube for every episode on the video side, where I'd also love it if you would like the show, smash the alert button and that little bell that you can ding to have the alert when the podcast drops. All that should be fun, and also ratings and reviews appreciated. Follow the show on Twitter /X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Roll. And I also write about the Hawks on occasion, or at least pretty regularly at these days. Patreon.com/BT Roll to find all of that. Again, I'm heading to Detroit after this podcast. I'll be in the building on Tuesday, Little Caesars Arena, for the first ever in-season tournament game involving the Atlanta Hawks. So stay tuned for that. I'll have a breakdown after the game as always, and we'll see you all next time.